Hi, shall we begin? So, the story of the film is set in rural England, and here we are shown a family consisting of a husband, wife, and a small child. The husband's name is Richard, who is an academic archaeologist. Then, the wife's name is Juliette, long for Jules, and their son's name is Owen. This family lives in a remote farmhouse in a place called Acre. Initially, they used to live in central Leeds, but recently they shifted here. This farmhouse belonged to Richard's father and was bought by Richard's grandfather. So in a way, this is Richard's own house now. Anyway, in the starting scene, we find out that Owen hears a kind of whistling. Now one day, when the family goes to a local fair, Owen sticks a stick into a pony's eye. Owen behaving this aggressively was very problematic, so the family takes him to a psychiatrist. Here, Jules tells the doctor that Owen always says some Jack Gray person or creature whistles inside his mind. Hearing this, Richard gets furious because his father used to tell him folk tales about this Jack Gray as well. Now, this story is likely being told to Owen by their neighbor Gordon. Basically, Gordon used to take care of Owen when the couple was out working, and now Richard wants Gordon to stay away from Owen because of Gordon's stories that Owen has started thinking strange thoughts and acting oddly. Whatever the case, according to the doctors, Owen doesn't have any kind of mental illness. Later, we see Richard and Owen spending quality time in a big field, and this field was theirs. It was bought by Richard's granddad. Here, Richard tells Owen that their land has the roots of an old oak tree. This tree was very significant because, in old times, all the villagers would gather here and have all their important meetings. In fact, people were also hanged here, if you know what I mean. But over time, the tree was cut down, and its roots are still buried somewhere in their land. Just that no one knows exactly where. Hearing this, Owen says that Gordon had already told him all this, and that he also knows the tree's spirit is a doorway to other worlds. Hearing this, Richard is surprised and tells Owen that all this talk about spirits is nonsense and that he shouldn't pay attention to Gordon. Owen then says that someday he and his dad will definitely find the roots of that tree, and Richard agrees. Anyway, the next day, Richard goes to work and Jules is home with Owen. Suddenly, Jules zones out while looking at the farm, and when she comes back to her senses, she finds Owen lying on the ground. Owen had an asthma attack, and Jules quickly takes Gordon's help to rush him to the hospital. She then calls Richard, but by the time Richard reaches the hospital, we learn that Owen is no longer in this world. This tragic incident breaks the family. From here, the story jumps ahead. It's now winter, and Jules is still in depression, while Richard finds a handwritten journal called Starve Acre among his father Neil's old belongings. This journal had strange writings about invocations and ritualistic summonings, which reminds Richard of his childhood. Actually, Richard's father Neil didn't treat him well in childhood. He would strip Richard naked and make him stand in freezing fields, and in general, Neil was a bit eccentric and abusive. This journal had the location where the old tree's roots might be, and Richard personally starts an excavation project there. I say personally because currently Richard was on leave from work, so yeah, it was a personal project. Now, according to folklore, 17th century villagers had buried and sealed the tree to shut the doorway to the womb of nature, that is, the spirit world entrance. Meanwhile, Jules's sister Harriet comes to stay and take care of her. Harriet immediately begins cleaning Owen's room, something Richard and Jules couldn't do due to emotional attachment. We now see that Richard and Jules start having arguments and begin blaming each other for the unfortunate incident. Jules believes Owen was a troubled kid whose problems Richard ignored, while Richard questions why Jules delayed in taking Owen to the hospital during the asthma attack. Later, we see Richard spending day and night digging at the site, and one night he finds a hare or rabbit skeleton, cleans it, places it in a box, and brings it home. That same night, Jules sleepwalks all the way to Richard's digging site, which was strange. The next day, Gordon introduces a woman named Mrs. Ford to Jules. Mrs. Ford uses yoga and incantations to heal people's emotional pain. She performs a candle healing with Jules and Harriet, chanting Om Vajrapani Hum. At first, Jules finds it difficult to participate, but she composes herself and joins the healing. Suddenly, the candles blow out and then relight with a strong flame, and Mrs. Ford announces that the dandelion has burned, meaning Owen's spirit has finally moved on. This healing helps Jules feel a little better, but when Richard finds out about all this, he doesn't believe it at all. On the other hand, the hair bones that Richard had brought home had now started to grow something, almost as if the skeleton was gradually regenerating a body over itself. Ideally, a body decays and only bones are left behind, but here the process was happening in reverse. Richard immediately takes it to his workplace and shows it to his colleague Stephen. Stephen says that it's just fungus growing on the bones, and upon hearing this, Richard heads back home. On the way, the university dean tells Richard that he should take a full sabbatical to deal with his loss. In the days that follow, muscles start forming on the Hare skeleton, and at one point, it even develops a heart that begins to beat. Yes, it's eerie, but the heart literally starts beating. Slowly but surely, the Hare skeleton was coming to life, and this completely shocks Richard. Finally, one day, the Hare becomes fully alive and starts jumping around. Richard tries to catch it, and just then, Jules walks into the room and sees the Hare. For the first time in many months, we see a smile on Jules's face. The couple then puts the Hare into a box and leaves it out in the farm. That night, after a long time, Richard and Jules become intimate again, and it seems like the presence of the Hare is helping to reconnect their broken family. During this time, Richard also opens up to Jules, telling her how his father used to treat him terribly when he was a child. Richard then resumes digging at that specific spot on the land. Meanwhile, back at home, Jules starts sketching the Hare. Seeing their strange behavior, Harry sneaks into Richard's room and starts reading Neil's journal, titled Starve Acre. Harry discovers that the journal clearly talks about rituals. It says that followers would gather at Starve Acre and offer 3 sacrifices, first a child, then a man, and finally a woman. Only after that would the sacrificial ritual be complete, and the dandelion bud would bloom, meaning someone would be given new life. You'll soon find out who that someone is. There's also a poem in the journal that reads, "The price we pay is 1, 2, 3, to let joy pour from the whistling tree." The journal also contains a photo of the ancient lost tree, whose roots go deep underground and seem to be connected to some kind of entity or doorway. Jules scolds Harry for touching Richard's belongings. Meanwhile, Richard successfully digs up the exact spot where that ancient tree once stood. The tree's trunk and roots are still intact. Just then, his colleague Stephen arrives. He is shocked to see the tree so well preserved and joins Richard in investigating, since it could be a major archaeological discovery. Suddenly, they hear Harry screaming. Richard rushes back and finds that the Hare had returned and tried to attack Harry's stomach. She had intervened, but the Hare had left deep cuts on her arm. Now here's the shocking part. Jules was holding the Hare in her lap like a baby. Instead of getting rid of it, she was feeding it. Not just that, she even started putting it to sleep in a cradle like an infant. It was clear that Jules had grown extremely protective of the Hare and was now treating it like her own child. Seeing this, Harry realizes that Jules has completely lost her mental stability. She quickly dresses her wounds and leaves the house, driving away in her car. Back at the tree site, Richard returns to help Stephen with the digging. Richard is starting to feel strange, and meanwhile, Jules has completely lost her mind. She begins to have disturbing visions where Stephen is screaming that he has come to take the Hare. Of course, these visions aren't real. It's the Hare who is manipulating her. Jules starts believing that Stephen wants to take her baby, the Hare, away from her. Enraged, she grabs a knife, storms out, and attacks Stephen, killing him. Richard witnesses all of this, but he doesn't react much, which suggests that he too is falling under the Hare's spell. Harry goes to a phone booth outside of town, but it doesn't work. Just then, Gordon shows up and begins telling her the truth. He reveals that Richard's father, Neil, had tried to summon someone called Dandelion Jack. For this, 3 sacrifices were needed: a child, a man, and a woman. The first sacrifice was meant to be a child, and Neil had intended to sacrifice his own son, Richard. That's why he used to make Richard stand outside in the cold. But Dandelion Jack's sacrifices only work when the father genuinely loves the child, and since Neil didn't love Richard, the sacrifice failed. Richard survived, but now Dandelion Jack had chosen Owen as the first sacrifice because Richard truly loved Owen. So yes, the first sacrifice was complete. Now Jack needed a man and a woman. The man has also been sacrificed, Stephen. That leaves just one sacrifice remaining, a woman. After hearing all this, Hare rushes back to the farm to save her sister from whatever's coming. Back at the house, Jules and Richard are sitting in a room. Jules reveals that during Owen's asthma attack, she had intentionally delayed taking him to the hospital. She believed they would be happier without Owen. So this clearly shows that Jules had been deeply influenced by Dandelion Jack, so much so that she purposely let Owen die. It's now clear that Dandelion Jack's spirit had been pulling the strings from the beginning, planning everything so that Owen would become the first sacrifice. Ideally, Richard should have reacted to this, but again, he doesn't. Both of them sit there with the Hare in their lap, as if they're holding their own child. Just then, Hare arrives and sees this madness. She walks up to get a closer look at the Hare, and in the very next moment, Richard attacks her and kills her. So that marks the completion of the third sacrifice, and Jules is visibly delighted. Outside, we see Gordon burying Stephen's body. Mrs. Ford is present too, performing chants as part of the sacrifice ritual. This confirms that both Gordon and Mrs. Ford had prior knowledge about everything that was to happen. Inside the house, Jules is seen breastfeeding the Hare just like a mother would nurse her baby, and with this deeply unsettling image, the film's star of Acre comes to an end. It's a linear story arc, although the character of Dandelion Jack is not deeply explored in the narrative, which we shall break down. The ending is indeed disturbing. It marks the completion of the legend of Dandelion Jack, a supernatural entity that Richard describes as the womb of nature and the pagan entrance to the spirit world. Releasing this entity required a specific ritual. According to the legend, 3 human sacrifices were needed: a child, a woman, and a man. Owen became the first sacrifice, then Stephen, and finally Hare. That's how the trio of sacrifices was fulfilled to bring Jack Gray out of the spirit world. Now the hare, or rabbit, that we see in the film is actually the physical manifestation of Jack Gray, aka Dandelion Jack. The novel's author, Andrew Michael Hurley, has shown deep interest in hare-related folklore, where witches would shapeshift into hares to avoid detection, like the story of the witch Miggleton from Wood Plumpton. In the film, Jack Gray manifests through an otherworldly hare with unusually long ears, which miraculously regenerates from a skeleton into a living creature. Dandelion Jack is essentially a malevolent nature spirit that resides in the landscape of Starve Acre. While he is Hurley's own invention, the name takes inspiration from older folkloric figures like Jack in the Green Man, and Robin Goodfellow, who are playful yet sinister spirits of the woods and fields. At the beginning of the film, a poem about the dandelion describes this mythical figure, invoking Jack Dandelion or the devil, calling him back from nature's womb. Jack Gray has the power to influence and communicate with members of Richard's family, for example, by using whistling to push Owen toward darker actions. His ultimate goal is to escape the spirit world, and everything he does is directed toward achieving that. In the film's final scene, when Jules breastfeeds the hare, it becomes a powerful and disturbing symbol. It signifies her twisted form of rebirth and acceptance, implying that she has now adopted Jack Gray as her new child, replacing her lost son Owen. Even if it meant sacrificing innocent lives, she has done so, fully embracing a malevolent entity as part of her family. It marks the extreme edge of her grief and descent into madness, forming a new, horrifying family unit. Now, there's another popular theory circulating on Reddit, one that suggests nothing supernatural was happening at all. The question here is, were these events truly paranormal or just manifestations of Richard and Jules' grief, guilt, and the oppressive environment they found themselves in? Maybe they both underwent a shared psychological breakdown. If we think about it, Richard's visions, like the regeneration of the Hare, and Jules' actions, like delaying Owen's treatment or killing Stephen, can be interpreted as psychological fragmentation. Even before Owen's death, this family was broken. Richard himself was a victim of abuse at the hands of his father. And though he tried to be a good father, that trauma was unresolved. There's even a scene that hints Jules had a strained relationship with her own parents. So when they moved to this isolated farmland, all that trauma resurfaced. Owen's death, the last thread holding them together, snapped, leading them down a dark psychological spiral. This theory explains that there may have been no supernatural force, just two people mentally shattered by grief. Tell me in the comments which theory makes more sense as per your reason. Coming back to the film, we don't get a lot of background on the whistling tree or the womb of nature. Their origins and powers remain a mystery. Was the tree truly an entrance to the spirit world, used by pagans? What are Jack Gray's limitations? Is his influence confined only to Starve Acre, or is it broader, as implied by Richard's family history? These are the questions the film leaves you with unanswered, making you think long after it ends. There are noted significant differences between the novel and the movie. The central theme of the movie is grief and loss. Andrew Michael Hurley described grief as its own landscape, one that shifts and transforms, affecting how people perceive reality. There's no start or endpoint to grief, no inherent meaning or explanation, and that's what traps the characters in a never-ending loop. Starve Acre has often been compared to British folk horror classics like The Wicker Man and The Blood on Satan's Claw. These were all products of their time, and so is this film. It uses genre tropes to explore the aching psychology of grief, just like movies such as Don't Look Now, Pet Sematary, and Hereditary did.